Feeling overwhelmed by the demands of parenting and your child's behavior? Well, you're not alone. In this day and age, every parent is feeling super overwhelmed by life, their child's behavior. Just getting through the day can be really hard. The US Surgeon General says that 48% of parents in the US are feeling overwhelmed. I'm not surprised by that. And I bet you're not either. So let's talk about some of the reasons why parents are overwhelmed. What does it look like? And most importantly, what you can do about it to counter that overwhelm in less than 10 minutes a day. So, some of the most common reasons that parents really get triggered or feel really overwhelmed, I think more than anything, is just high demands, right? We're living in a world where we have a lot on our plate. Our kids have a lot on our plate. Today, my dad had an injury, so he's in a rehab. And, I had this whole plan worked out so that I could just get there. Well, my son's Chromebook stopped working. So all of a sudden, I'm the one who knows where all that stuff is. It just took me off a different track. So then I'm late. Then the day just starts moving in that direction. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. So I have to take some time to actually work on resetting myself. But there's just so many demands, it's really hard. And I think that another major reason why parents are so overwhelmed is actually just emotional stress and worry, especially if you have wired differently kids. 50% of kids in America have a physical or a mental health issue. Within 7 years, 50% of children will be born with autism. We're moving into a uniquely wired brain profile, and that's okay. Our kids are great, but it also means that they might need more patience, attention, and time from us. And, when you are struggling, right, what happens? Then your sleep gets disrupted. You may have physical issues in for yourself. If you're a woman like me of a certain age, you might be going through perimenopause or menopause. These are all factors that really contribute to overwhelm. And so when we're looking at countering overwhelm, that's why we really need to look at what are those root causes? Just like we do with our kids, we need to look at that as parents too, right? And I think that with so much going on, sleep deprivation really becomes a major factor for so many people. It's rare that I meet people who say, I'm a great sleeper. And again, what do we need to prioritize, right? And certainly, health should be a priority. But, a lot of people, particularly moms, we don't really prioritize those things because we're in this mindset that our kid is, we're in a sprint and we're looking for that next solution. And that's just not the way the nervous system works. It's a marathon, right? So that means slow and steady wins the race, and we need to do more. And that's why we're there having this conversation about what the overwhelm is, right? So time and financial pressures are a major contributor to many families as our economy, the inflation rates are going up. And also, we're often chasing down solutions for our kids. And there's not a lot of efficacy in how these solutions are really thought about. And you try to go to providers and your kid still struggles. You're still in overwhelm. And this is a big factor, right? And in all of this, just difficulty managing your child's behavior. Hear me say all the time that we have to get a license for fishing. But we don't need a license for having a kid. And nobody ever thinks their kid's going to have a behavioral issue, including my own, but yet so many do. And we don't really know those tools, which is why I do what I do. I talk so much about nervous system regulation, self-regulation. The next episode, we're going to dive into co-regulation and just how that actually is quite magical and how it can turn behavior around. I think one of the other things I know that when I'm going down, I often will feel like I'm getting sick. That's what happened to me today. So that I have things that I use that really help reset my nervous system because I have a high viral load. I got Epstein-Barr as a teenager. So I know that's a contributor for me when I'm feeling overwhelmed. But one of the other big things that I notice when I'm feeling overwhelmed is sensory. So when I start being annoyed by noise, or really for me, it's light. That is a clue that I am really overwhelmed and there's things that I need to do. And, in our modern times, as we talked about, managing work and family is hard. I was talking to my dad this morning at rehab, and he just loved my mom, Philomena, you guys. Oh, just loved her, and boy, should he have, because if you're listening to me, Philomena was just a badass mom. But she was home. It was a different time. And, she took care of everything. And when my friends would come home after going out, because you should let your kids do things like go into the city in a mob, and go to teen nightclubs and things like that. My mom would just get up and she'd make us pizzas from scratch, and she had that ability because it was much easier to have one parent be home in the 70s and 80s. And even then, more than half my friends their moms were already working. And there's nothing wrong. I would never want to not be a working mom. It wasn't even in my vocabulary. And I made sure when I was screening marriage candidates, if you know me, it's the truth, that I was like, what do you think about that? And even then in the early 90s, they were like, what? I think even though you're getting your doctorate, you should stay home. I was like, on to the next. So the pressures of having that work family balance are real, right? And we just have to make sure that we are finding, hopefully, vocations, not just job vocations that support us. We're exclusively a group of women who work at my center. And, we do have a lot of things that we try to, have work-life balance, right? So I think one of the biggest things that I see for parents in feeling overwhelmed is really unresolved stuff. Just a lot of unresolved emotional stuff and unresolved trauma. Trauma has this way where we think we can just stuff it down, but it's just going to pop up at the most inopportune times. And it's surprising for a lot of parents when they have, many, many traumas, big T's and little T's. So that's big trauma or little trauma, that we think we've gotten on the other side of it, but we may not have gotten proper care. There's no way to work around trauma without really getting clinical support. And there's so many good therapists who do trauma work. And you don't have to activate to do trauma work. You can actually get in a way where you can process it. Though, some of my favorite tools, of course, are neurofeedback, but you still need to do the talk part of it. But I'm a big fan of somatic therapy, EMDR, EFT tapping. These are all really good trauma therapies in the hands of somebody who can help you work through and put those in a safe place where you're not really activated is important, because it's just going to keep activating you and contributing to your overwhelmed. I think another thing that nobody talks about is unrealistic expectations and perfectionism. A lot of parents have very, very unrealistic expectations. And some of that is because of another contributor, which is social pressure and judgment, that it looks like kids are more capable than they are. And, it's always surprising to me, being one of the wealthiest areas in probably the world. I've had parents where they have a tutor 4 days a week working with the kid. Like, that's just not realistic. And there might be some legit reasons in that, but a lot of times it was because they just needed their kids to really just have these high levels. There weren't necessarily a processing problem. But I think the number one thing that I see as a contributor to parents feeling overwhelmed is a lack of actually taking time to regulate their own nervous system. And we'll talk a little bit about that and what to do about that. That is truly the thing. And you can do it in 10 minutes a day. And we're going to talk about that. So what are some of the signs? So they cross into emotional, physical, cognitive, social, relationship, right? You can see when you're overwhelmed, right? So, emotionally, you might be more tearful, easily overwhelmed. Physically, like myself, I get sick. I know when I'm going down. I'm so tuned into my body. I actually start to lose hearing because my inflammation in my body will go up. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I can take antivirals, I can do all that stuff. But what am I going to do to actually reset my nervous system? So that is very much my clear, the ship is going down, right? You can't just push through it. You got to actually pull back. And then, behavioral stuff, right? Maybe you started smoking again, or you're, just find yourself yelling and things like that you don't feel good about. And then it puts you in a shame spike cycle, which none of us want, right? Socially, you might withdraw, or you might just be like, I don't want to be around my kids. I'm going to get out. And all the time. That's not a great thing. Everybody should go out. And your relationships can suffer. When you're overwhelmed as a parent, if you have a partner, you're going to be in friction, right? You might be in friction with grandma or your sister or whoever it is. These are all clues. So you might say in your head, I'm not overwhelmed, but you are, right? And as my friends have been checking on me this week, I've been real honest. Like, I was like, this is as hard gets. When you're, you're caring for somebody who you adore, Tony, grandpa. But also I've never seen him go down. So it's a whole other thing. And Philomena taught me well, and I want to be there and I want to care for him at a really high level. And I'm trying to manage all that. And I'm doing it, but I'm being honest. It's very overwhelming. I think you all can relate to that. So what do we do? What do we do to counter this, right? We can't magic wand this, people. We can't be like, oh, it's not bothering me that, whatever is going on with you. I like to share my stuff because I'm real. And this is all something that affects every one of us, right? But you need to take 10 minutes a day and you need to reset to regulate, right? You need to pick one thing. I don't care what it is. So is it going to be 10 minutes of praying in the morning? I'd love to see you do more, but it really only needs 10 minutes for your nervous system to reset. Is it breath work? Is it, doing going out and quick nature walk, right? And resetting your nervous system isn't like intense cardio. You have to do calming things. I carry my essential oils, and just to share a little bit about how important it is when you're so overwhelmed. My dad had a surgery, and there was just a tremendous amount of pain, and I could see him truly in a sympathetic dominant state. It was unbelievable, to be honest. And he had a major back surgery. And so what did I do? I was like, okay, I pulled out my PEMF, pulling him down into that parasympathetic state, and I got out lavender. And honestly, the lavender worked kind of like magic, right? So I could have just sat there and prayed, and we should pray, right? And of course, that's important to me. But I also needed to actually do something. And when you're feeling so overwhelmed, I think the thing that I see people do is that analysis paralysis. And that is not going to help you. And you just need to move forward. So is it sitting there and doing your breath work? And, set your timer and, have it go off 3 times a day to remind you, you have to actually do this, right? This should be as much of a priority as brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth prevents cavities and gum disease. Nervous system regulation prevents overwhelm for you, and it actually helps your child be focused, more regulated. They can pay attention, and this all can occur without medication, without nagging, but it doesn't happen overnight. But these are things that work immediately. Immediately. So I know we need quick relief, but the win is in the long term. And I believe every parent has that power, and you got that power. And for sure. So in the next one, we're going to talk about co-regulation and how important it is and actually how you can do it. But when you are struggling, right, you're out there swimming, and you're like, I'm so overwhelmed. You have to ask for and accept support. I'm going to tell you that I am the worst with that. Like, that is my worst thing. And I've learned to cull my herd of my besties, and really have a tight group of people that I know that we have backsies for each other. I don't want to be friends with anybody unless you do backseas. Okay. This is the Italian way. And I did too many where I was caring for other people and never got any support. And so then that leaves you in this place where you feel like you can't really ask for support. Well, guess what? Sometimes you can't ask for support because they're not really your people. They're just around you. So make sure you're doing that. Now, I am a huge believer in, obviously regulating the nervous system. And we have created this really easy way for parents to get support for themselves and for their child, and it's the dysregulation solution. All you have to do is go to drroseanne.com/dysregulation solution. And it really is all the, things you need for parenting's toughest moments, right? The how-tos, the role plays, because we know when we have kids that are wired differently, this is a major reason why we're overwhelmed. Yes, our nervous system is overloaded, but you're caught in this reactivity cycle. So unless you are really taking concerted action, you're also really getting guidance from somebody like me, who is a licensed, credentialed, trained person, 3 decades of experience. Be very, very careful in this world where anybody can get a certificate, say they're a coach. You want to make sure you're getting the right solutions. And everything I do is about science-backed solutions. And I think you know that because you're listening. You can tell I know my stuff. But you got to move your coolie, as we would say. And you've got to give yourself 10 minutes a day. So we're going to talk next about a co-regulation in the next episode. But, if you are struggling, head over and go check out our dysregulation solution, drroseanne.com/dysregulation. Dysregulation is DYS, people. You can just go to drroseanne.com and you can find out. So make sure you are taking the time for yourself, 10 minutes a day, to counter that overwhelm.